In the early hours of the morning, my phone lit up with a text message from my own son. It read, "Dad, plans changed. You are not coming on the cruise next week. Monica wants only her family there." The very next day, I canceled the payments, sold the house they lived in, and left town. When they came back from their luxurious vacation, the house they thought they owned was gutted to the studs. Before I dive into exactly how I systematically dismantled their perfect little lives, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach an entitled family member a harsh lesson in reality. My name is Harrison Caldwell. I am 70 years old, and for 40 years I ran a ruthless construction contracting business right here in Seattle. It was a Tuesday, 6 in the morning. The Seattle sky outside my window was still that heavy, wet gray that clings to the city for months. I was sitting at my kitchen table nursing a black coffee. The house was quiet. It had been painfully quiet for 3 years, ever since my wife Diane passed away. I was just staring at the empty chair across from me, thinking about her, when my phone buzzed on the cold granite countertop. It was a text from Derek, my 34-year-old son, a man I had broken my back on construction sites to provide for. I picked up the phone expecting a simple question about our upcoming trip, maybe a question about the flight times or the luggage tags. Instead, the words on the glowing screen hit me like a physical blow to the chest. "Dad, plans changed. You are not coming on the cruise next week. Monica wants only her family there." I just sat there in the dim light of the kitchen. I read the message over and over again, trying to make the letters mean something else. "You are not coming on the cruise. Monica wants only her family there." My chest tightened. Let me give you some necessary context so you understand exactly what I was looking at. This was not a cheap weekend getaway to a local resort. This was a 10-day ultra-luxury Alaskan cruise. I had paid exactly $45,000 for it, putting the entire amount on my personal platinum credit card. I did not ask my son or his wife for a single dime. I paid for it because I wanted to honor Diane. Alaska was the one place my wife had always wanted to visit, but we never made it because I was always working, always building, always pouring every ounce of my energy into securing a financial empire for Derek. When she died, I promised myself I would take our son on that trip to celebrate her birthday. I booked the owner suite, the absolute best room on the entire ship, a sprawling luxury suite with panoramic ocean views, a private balcony, and personal butler service. I even prepaid for helicopter tours over the glaciers. I booked it for all of us. Me, Derek, and his 31-year-old wife, Monica. I wanted us to be together. I wanted to share that profound memory with the only family I had left in this world. And now my son was sending me a cowardly text message at 6 in the morning, casually uninviting me from my own $45,000 gift, simply because his wife wanted her family there instead. A cold, heavy silence filled my kitchen. I set my coffee mug down. My hands were perfectly steady. When you spend 4 decades managing massive construction sites, dealing with corrupt suppliers and lazy foremen, you learn very quickly that anger is a completely useless emotion. You do not throw tantrums. You fix the problem. I tapped Derek's name on my screen and hit the call button. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the dialing tone. It rang once, twice, then the line went completely dead. He rejected my call. My own son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the man whose expensive college tuition I paid in full with cash, was too much of a coward to even speak to me. Derek had always been spineless. He had gladly traded his mother's tough love upbringing for Monica's manipulative absolute control over his life. I took a deep, stabilizing breath, steeling myself, and dialed the number a second time. This time someone picked up, but it was not Derek. "Hello, Harrison." It was Monica. Her voice was hushed, tightly controlled, and dripping with that fake, elegant politeness she always used when she was about to say something completely toxic. She did not call me Dad. She rarely did. I kept my voice perfectly level, hiding the storm brewing inside me. Put my son on the phone, Monica. She let out a small, dramatic sigh, clearly annoyed that I was pushing the issue. Derek is in the shower right now, Harrison, she said smoothly. And honestly, there is really nothing to discuss. He sent you the text. The plans have changed. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the bleak sky outside. Monica, I said slowly, choosing my words with absolute precision. That is a $45,000 trip. I booked the owner suite for us to celebrate Diane. You do not just change the plans and uninvite the person who paid for the entire ticket. I could hear her shifting on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of running water in the background, proving Derek was hiding. Then, she delivered the words that completely shattered whatever fragile illusion of family we had left. Look, Harrison, she whispered, her tone hardening into something deeply condescending. My parents have never been on a luxury vacation in their entire lives. They really deserve this experience. Plus, my brother Bradley is coming too. Let us be honest here. Older people like you get sick at sea so easily. It is a huge liability. You would just be tired and complaining the whole time. My parents are in much better shape to actually enjoy the owner suite. I closed my eyes. The sheer audacity of this woman was staggering. She was hijacking my generous gift, my hard-earned money, and my deeply personal tribute to my dead wife to use as a private all-expenses, paid luxury vacation for her own parents and her deadbeat brother. People who had never contributed a single cent to her life, let alone ours. I stayed utterly silent on the line, letting her disrespectful words hang in the empty air. Monica took my calculated silence as a victory. She thought she had won. She thought she was dealing with a tired, lonely, clueless old man who would just roll over and accept the massive disrespect because he was desperate for family connection. We will make sure to buy you some nice souvenirs from the ports, Harrison. She added, her voice dripping with artificial pity. Just stay home. Relax. Enjoy the quiet time alone. We will see you when we get back. And before I could say a single word in response, she ended the call. The line went dead, leaving me alone in the dark kitchen. The line went dead, leaving me alone in the dark kitchen. I slowly pulled the phone away from my ear and set it down on the cold granite island. For a long minute, I simply stood there, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. The sting of Monica's voice still echoed loudly in my head. Older people like you get sick at sea so easily. You would just be tired and complaining the whole time. In a different life, maybe a different man would have screamed in anger. Maybe he would have violently thrown his coffee mug against the wall, called his son back repeatedly, and demanded a tearful explanation. But I did none of those things. When you spend 40 years running a commercial construction business in Seattle, you learn to process betrayal differently. You do not survive 4 decades of dealing with corrupt suppliers, corner-cutting foremen, and brutal contract negotiations by throwing a helpless tantrum. In my line of work, when a foundation cracks or a massive steel beam buckles under heavy pressure, you do not cry about it. You pull the blueprints, you inspect the structural integrity, and you systematically locate the rot. Then you tear it out with unforgiving precision. I calmly walked out of the kitchen, leaving my coffee untouched on the counter, and made my way down the hall to my private study. The wooden floorboards creaked softly beneath my feet, a highly familiar sound in a house that felt suddenly entirely too empty and incredibly cold. I sat down at my heavy mahogany desk, flipped open my laptop, and waited patiently for the screen to cast its pale blue glow across the quiet room. I needed to see the exact damage for myself. I opened my personal email and quickly found the original booking confirmation from Royal Caribbean. It was a massive receipt. $45,000 charged directly to my personal platinum credit card without a second thought. I remembered the specific day I booked it, sitting right here in this very chair. I had looked at a framed photograph of Diane on my desk, her smiling face from a trip to the coast many years ago, and I had felt a profound sense of purpose. I was buying us a beautiful, lasting memory, a grand, sweeping tribute to the wonderful woman who had held our entire family together. I had carefully selected the owner suite, the absolute crown jewel of the ship, because I truly wanted Derek to experience the kind of extravagant luxury I had worked my entire life to provide. I highlighted the long booking reference number, copied it to my clipboard, and navigated to the official cruise line passenger portal. My hands did not shake as I steadily pasted the code into the secure login field. I hit the enter key. The loading icon spun for a few agonizing seconds, a small blue wheel turning round and round, before the detailed reservation page finally populated on the monitor. I stared blankly at the bright screen. I blinked, leaning much closer, my eyes rapidly scanning the detailed passenger manifest. I scrolled down to the primary guest details section, fully expecting to see my name, Harrison Caldwell, listed prominently, first as the primary account holder and lead passenger. My name was completely gone. It was not moved down to a secondary cabin. It was not downgraded to a standard interior room. It was completely surgically erased from the entire digital system. In the exact space where my name absolutely should have been, boldly occupying the master bedroom of the massive owner suite, was the name Richard Sterling. Right below him was Margaret Sterling, Monica's parents. The very people who had spent the last 5 years making thinly veiled, highly arrogant comments about my blue-collar background, constantly judging the rough calluses on my hands at every single Thanksgiving dinner, were now the primary occupants of a $45,000 luxury suite I had personally paid for. My chest grew tight, a painfully cold knot of realization rapidly forming deep in my stomach, but I deliberately forced myself to keep scrolling. There were 2 more passengers attached to the active reservation: Derek Caldwell and Monica Sterling. That made 4 people. The owner suite was perfectly designed to hold 6 people comfortably. I looked carefully at the final passenger slot, the one that absolutely undeniably should have belonged to me. Instead, I saw the name Bradley Sterling. Bradley, Monica's 32-year-old brother. A profoundly lazy man who had completely dropped out of 2 different local colleges, who had been rightfully fired from 3 different entry-level jobs I had personally secured for him as massive personal favors, and who currently lived rent-free in his parents' basement, actively playing video games all day long. This fully grown adult man, who had never bothered to buy me so much as a cheap cup of coffee, was now officially registered to casually enjoy the private balcony, the personal butler service, and the premium evening dining packages that I had financed with my own blood sweat and decades of grueling physical labor. They had not merely uninvited me. That alone would have been intensely cruel, but this was something entirely different. They had actively logged into my private secure account, deliberately hijacked my paid reservation, and selfishly replaced me with the entire Sterling family. They had completely stolen my deeply personal gift to use as a highly private, all-expenses, paid luxury family vacation for greedy, terrible people who meant absolutely nothing to me. I sat back deeply in my leather chair, fully letting the sheer, horrifying magnitude of the betrayal completely wash over my tired bones. Monica had intricately orchestrated this entire scheme. I knew her ruthless tactics perfectly well. She was an absolute master of silent, deeply toxic control, constantly framing her immensely selfish demands as acts of necessary medical care and profound emotional empathy. She had probably convinced Derek that I was simply too old, too fragile, or too painfully depressing to be around on a fun party trip. She had likely spun an elaborate, highly convincing narrative, where taking her family was somehow a tremendous favor to me, gracefully sparing me the extreme physical exhaustion of extended travel across the ocean. And Derek, my spineless, completely cowardly son, had eagerly let her do it. He had willingly allowed his deeply manipulative wife to actively log into the reservation portal, manually delete his deeply grieving father's name, and freely hand over a small fortune in luxury travel to his horrible, condescending in-laws. He had stood by totally silently while they completely ruthlessly hijacked a highly sacred trip explicitly meant to deeply honor his own mother's lasting memory. The betrayal was so incredibly profound, so deeply calculated and viciously malicious, that it instantly and permanently stripped away absolutely any lingering paternal weakness I might have foolishly held onto. I looked intensely at the specific booking details once again. The massive cruise ship was officially scheduled to fully depart in exactly 7 days. Next Tuesday. The official boarding passes were already actively generated and saved. The specialized luggage tags were physically printed. The incredibly expensive premium drink packages were already manually selected. I could clearly see on the screen that Bradley had already happily gone in and successfully upgraded his personal beverage package to the absolute ultimate tier, happily granting him unlimited daily access to incredibly expensive top-shelf liquor. All of these excessive, deeply arrogant charges were linked directly and continuously to my personal platinum credit card, which was incredibly still dutifully stored deeply in the ship system as the primary default payment method for absolutely all ongoing onboard expenses. They actually thought they had finally won. They truly deeply believed they had successfully and completely outmaneuvered me. Monica had smugly sized me up and quickly foolishly decided I was just a highly tired, deeply broken old man who would quietly and obediently absorb the massive, horrible disrespect, who would obediently stay home and sadly accept her profoundly fake pity, simply because I was far too desperate for my son's eventual meager affection to ever cause a major messy scene. She arrogantly thought my heavy silence on the phone earlier was the pathetic, completely submissive silence of a totally, utterly defeated man. She did not actively understand exactly who she was foolishly dealing with. She did not logically understand that a seasoned man who spent 40 incredibly grueling years successfully dominating the highly brutal, entirely unforgiving world of commercial corporate contracting absolutely does not simply quietly surrender his hard-earned personal assets. I absolutely did not build massive, expensive skyscrapers by carelessly letting greedy, terrible people steal my incredibly expensive raw materials. I positively did not successfully amass my large personal wealth by foolishly allowing lazy, deeply entitled parasites to quietly and constantly drain my private bank accounts without extremely serious, highly devastating consequences. I stared intensely at the glowing screen, quietly tracing the arrogant names of the entire Sterling family with my small digital cursor. An incredibly slow, deeply chilling clarity smoothly and completely settled entirely over my busy mind. The profound sadness was entirely gone now, completely instantly evaporated smoothly into the cold morning air. In its absolute place was a highly sharp, intensely focused, heavily tactical, purely destructive energy. I deliberately reached for the yellow legal notepad I constantly kept perfectly centered, firmly on my wooden desk, quietly clicking my heavy metal pen. I actively started writing down a highly detailed, extremely precise list. I absolutely did not quickly cancel the extremely expensive cruise tickets right then. That exact move would have been entirely too simple, far too incredibly easy. That specific choice would have only been a mere highly temporary inconvenience for them to eventually fix. I desperately, completely wanted them to happily pack their highly expensive designer bags. I fully wanted them to happily drive together to the busy, crowded port. I positively wanted them to successfully board that massive luxury ship fully, feel the fresh, cold ocean breeze, and fully deeply experience the highly arrogant thrill of their totally stolen victory. I intensely wanted them safely, completely trapped on that massive metal ship. I confidently closed the silver laptop with a highly quiet, beautifully definitive, extremely satisfying snap. The fragile foundation of our entire family had not just slightly cracked under pressure, it was entirely rotten to the very core. And it was exactly time to absolutely bring the whole heavy structure down. My smartphone vibrated against the hard granite surface of the kitchen island, breaking the heavy silence of the early morning. I looked down at the bright screen. The caller identification displayed Derek's name in bold black letters. It had been exactly 22 minutes since Monica had abruptly hung up on me. 22 minutes of absolute silence while my son presumably gathered the tiny fraction of courage required to finally face his own father. I let the phone vibrate 3 separate times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to sit in the uncomfortable tension of his own cowardly actions before I granted him an audience. On the 4th long ring, I reached out and slowly swiped the green icon to accept the call. I brought the device to my ear and simply breathed, waiting for him to speak first. I did not offer a warm greeting. I just let the empty dead air press heavily against his guilty conscience. "Dad, are you there?" Derek's voice came through